So first off, thank you to those cabinet members who are here. We'll go through the apologies in a minute. That's just come off the back of the summer season. And councillors, members of the public, and welcome to our interns as well. How you doing? To today's cabinet meeting at City Hall. Just a reminder to everyone to observe the social distancing. Please wear a mask while moving around the room, unless you're exempt from doing so. You're not required to wear a mask when you are speaking. As usual, the agenda. Just a reminder to everyone to observe the social distancing. 20 integrated community equipment services contract extension. So they contain information that is commercially sensitive, but I can confirm that cabinet members have had access to this information ahead of this meeting. Can I draw your attention to the emergency evacuation procedures, which are outlined on the agenda and are currently being displayed on the screen, I hope. Not yet, but they will be. There you go. And can I remind you that the meeting is being webcast, so when you are speaking, please speak into the microphone so you can be heard by those watching through our channel. Agenda item 2 is public forum, and statements and questions will be taken at the time of the relevant agenda item is being dealt with. So I will reply to questions or ask the relevant cabinet member to respond at that time. Agenda item 3, apologies for absence. So first off, Deputy Mayor Asher Craig is representing us in our twin city of Bordeaux. Again, actually just had a call earlier this week with one of the vice presidents of the European Commission, Sefcovic, about maintaining our European connections, but doing that through our city connections. We did that meeting with core cities, and yeah, investing in these relationships is incredibly important for us at this time. Ash is doing that. Councillor Helen Holland is on annual leave, sent me some really nice pictures just a couple of days ago, up in the wilds somewhere in Scotland. And Councillor Nickaby, you've got to leave us early, Nicola, today, so you'll be sliding out. Okay. That's it. Declarations of interests. Can I ask any cabinet members to declare any interest they have in relation to today's agenda? No? Okay, thank you. None. Agenda item 5, matters referred for consideration by scrutiny or full council. There are none on this occasion. Agenda item 6, reports from scrutiny commissions. There are 2 reports, one from People's Scrutiny Commission and one from Overview and Scrutiny Management Board, and Tim Kent is here to present both. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll start with the People's Scrutiny Commission report, if that's okay. So it's just a very small report back to you from the People's Scrutiny Commission. We met on the 19th of July. We looked at several reports, and I think we just wanted to ensure you got some feedback from our conversation. So firstly, we looked at the response to the independent review of Bristol's policies and actions for people with learning disabilities and autism. The Scrutiny Commission commends the Council for commissioning this report. The Commission notes that for too long, autism as a condition has not been fully recognised, and the way people are treated within the education, health and criminal justice systems need to be addressed. Whilst appreciating that system change requires a measured response rather than a quick fix, members request that an action plan be developed by way of co-production with people with lived experiences as quickly as possible, and with regular updates and opportunities to engage in its progress available to all stakeholders. The Commission would like an opportunity to engage in how the Council considers its responses to the recommendations contained in the report, and would welcome an update by way of a briefing to help us inform whether we should look at this again in the future. Secondly, response to the Bristol Alternative Learning Provision Review Report. Members note that the issues raised, which include lack of appropriate provision, have been around for many years, and so the report is welcomed, as is the fact there is now a joined-up approach to address the issues. Scrutiny members heard at the public forum item the view that parents' and carers' involvement in decisions about alternative learning provision has not been satisfactory, and so scrutiny members seek assurances that in future parents and carers will be fully engaged in co-production of development in alternative learning provision. We note that whilst the numbers of permanently excluded children in our city has reduced considerably in recent years, the use and associated costs of ALP has increased, resulting in the lived experiences of children and their families remaining being excluded from the mainstream. The Commission is concerned about the number of children with special educational needs within the alternative learning provision and has a view that expansion of special school places should be a priority. Which brings us to the third area we looked at, which was the school places reports. The Commission welcomes the reports that we received. And it states here the Chair expresses some optimism. I'm sure many of the other Scrutiny Commission members express some optimism as well, especially about specialist places. However, it is also noted that there is a dependence on unconfirmed funding, as not all of Phase 1 has been accounted for and is not yet known how much funding will be required for Phase 2. The Commission is therefore requesting an update when funding is confirmed and it is known what will be achieved. The Commission is concerned about reports of further delays to the opening of the required mainstream secondaries at Silverthorne Lane and the Park, and that this risks an ability to meet the basic legal requirement of having sufficient school places to cover need in the mainstream secondary, as well as special place arenas. Scrutiny members remain concerned about how the Council plans to meet the demand for secondary places and raise concerns about the number of children and young people still without a special school place provision. Thank you very much. Do you want me to go straight into the second one?
Yeah, go to the second one, thanks.
Okay. Pull it up. Good news, this is a lot shorter. Right, okay, so this is just a brief report back and request from Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. So I present this statement on behalf of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board to thank you for the improvements to the Cabinet Forward Plan. It is welcome progress that some agenda items are now appearing with more notice than the 28-day statutory minimum that was previously being achieved. However, the Forward Plan is still quite sparse. This makes it hard for us to do our job scrutinising the work of the Council, and in particular makes it hard for us to develop our own work programme for the Scrutiny Commissions for the rest of the year, which we'll be trying to do next Monday. The particular issues are lack of detail on many agenda items. Many items only have a title. We understand that it will not be possible to publish detailed documents in advance for each agenda item, but if you could provide a very brief summary of a few sentences, this will make a big difference to our ability to assess what the agenda item is about and how important it is. Alternatively, if relevant background documents already exist, to simply attach these. Some items are missing. In some cases, we personally know about items coming to Cabinet at particular dates in the near future, e.g. because we have been told about this timeline by officers, but they are still not on the Forward Plan, and it is not clear why they cannot be on there yet. We worry that if this is the case for agenda items we know about, there may be many others coming that we do not know about. And finally, a lack of pending section limits usefulness. We would like to see the return of the pending section of the Forward Plan. For items that do not have a specific date allocated yet, but are on their way, this would allow scrutiny members, councillors and members of the wider community to know broadly what's coming in enough time to give a meaningful input. Thank you for the progress so far. We hope to see this improvement continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So on to agenda item 7, Chair's business. And there were just a few things I wanted to share with you. Just one around COVID, just our warnings for the winter, a bit on the e-scooters, and also to let you know about a piece of work we are working on because it's gathering a pace. all the time. So one of the points we've been sharing is the challenge on delivering on decarbonisation, which I'm minded of a comment by Ban Ki-moon recently that said the battle on climate change will be won or lost in cities. Cities generating 75% of carbon emissions, over half the world's population, big driver of emissions, but also primed to be where the most people suffer from the consequences of climate change just because of the density of their populations. Coastal towns, inland flooding, fires, urban heat, all that. At the same time, cities offer an opportunity to house people with a lower carbon footprint because of the density and efficiencies that can be offered. Done well, done badly, it will be a disaster. Done well, cities can actually be part of the solution of housing, feeding, educating a growing world population. I'm a bit concerned that cities do not have a prominent role at the COP conference, not just because city leaders should have a voice, but because a main tool of how we manage a growing world population is, I think, is going to be inadequately featured at COP, which is a real concern of ours, actually. But the gap, as we've been pointing out, is finance. I thought it might just be worth just whipping through a few things that we're doing, and then just to know what's going on that. You know, making statements is great. Coming up with £10 billion to pay for it is better. So we've been involved in a really considerable piece of work, actually. It's the UK Cities Climate Investment Commission, you can find online. This is a network of, this is a collaboration between UK core cities. We were up with them on Friday, actually, at the Core Cities Cabinet, talking about this piece of work, which is a network of the 11 largest UK cities. London councils, the leader of Camden, Georgia Gould, was with us as well, and the Connected Places Catapult Centre, with the additional support from the City of London, the Green Finance Institute, and others. And the idea is to bring together the major investment propositions alongside financing mechanisms to help deliver net zero across all our urban centres. This has a real focus on the UK, this piece of work. The idea is to support a just transition through to a decarbonised economy. The chair is the head of cities and infrastructure at HSBC, and he's also the chair of Catapult, and that's Greg Clark. But the important thing about this is the UK cities coming together to begin to move at scale, which begins to unlock access to a different level of finance. One is it presents a united front to government in terms of scale of opportunity for the UK. But two, what we found is that a lot of the private money out there doesn't feel able to work with individual cities. It takes a lot of work and finance to get projects investment ready, and that goes for government investment ready as well as private sector investment ready. But what we also hear often is that an individual city does not offer the scale that's needed for some of this money to be able to land. And we are constantly reassured that there are trillions of dollars out there looking for projects to land. So with this group, we are in the process of a collective offer of about £200 billion investment, across our cities. Like I said, then that begins to offer us the scale that really could unlock. The aim is that by the time, as we come off the back of COP, certainly, and what I anticipate at COP will be a number of national announcements that are not attached to dates, places, measurable outcomes, or finance, that this could step into that gap as there is a rush to look for things to actually announce, things of substance to announce. And between ourselves, Cardiff, Liverpool, Nottingham, Leeds, Glasgow, that network of core cities, we can be part of that solution. As I said, that is part of a UK approach, but we're not just working at the UK level. I sit on the World Economic Forum, Future Cities Forum, and along with Susan Aitken, who's the leader of Glasgow, who's going to be hosting COP, we've actually been the conveners of a World Economic Forum and Open Society Foundation's series of dialogues with experts from City Government, International Development, Finance Centre, including Greg Clark, and a philanthropy to address this challenge of financing cities. I think one of the interesting things about this particular piece of work is we have unique challenges in the UK. But when you talk about someone like Yvonne Aki-Sawyer, for example, the Mayor of Freetown, there's a whole nother level of challenge to how those urban centres in the Global South are going to access that finance as well. And Yvonne is an active member of that dialogue. The first gathering we had about 25 people, including C40, Mayor's Migration Council, OSF, World Economic Forum, World Bank, as we said, private finance as well. The last gathering we had included Bloomberg's and a number of the big philanthropist organizations as well. I think we had about 60 participants. But there's a report coming out of that forum that will be, the report will be published later this month. And the idea is to certainly take that into COP and make sure that the COP conversation is a finance conversation. So without finance, not much happens. But also, just finally, and we are looking for ways to really have city input to this. We will be contributing to a number of events run in partnership with UK Cities Climate Investment Commission in Glasgow, ICLEI, working with Glasgow and potentially C40 and MMC. ICLEI are the formal channel for cities and regions into the United Nations process. And this year they've only been given 20 passes to the Blue Zone. And this is the influential area where decisions are made. This is the lowest number of passes they've ever been given. And I've shared this now that I'm incredibly concerned about the low level of city access to the COP conversations, as are a number of people. So we've written about this recently, an article coming out soon, but we've also been making some, outreach, political outreach, around this as well. As I said, we will not solve climate change without the decarbonisation of our cities. So it has to be put front and centre. Second item is on COVID. And we just want to issue that kind of warning, that urge to people to continue with COVID-safe behaviours. I think that people can prematurely feel we've overcome and we've learned to live with. And yes, we've had the rollout of the vaccine. But remember, in a city like Bristol, our background rate is plateaued, but it is high, around the 400 level. That means it is out there. It is still moving between people. Every time it moves, it has an opportunity to mutate. It could mutate into more vaccine-resistant strains. So we are continuing to urge people to continue with COVID-safe behaviours. It's been a long time. We know people have run a marathon, but there's another one to run. And we've heard the warnings of potential interventions if we are not on top of this as we go into the winter period. Remembering it's not just about COVID, it's about other health conditions that are impacted by the health service being put on strain. And the position of our health service now is it's been under incredible strain for 18 months. Another surge is another level of demand on top of an already stretched and exhausted organisation. So we have to keep going with our COVID-safe behaviours. And on e-scooters, just to say over 30, we are looking to extend our trial period. Over 30 authorities have been taking part in year-long trials of e-scooters, although each did have different start and end dates. We are incredibly pleased that the Department for Transport has invited those authorities to extend the trials until March next year and bringing in those end dates into alignment. We're going to submit the request for an extension of that trial through the WECA structure, which is obviously the structure we set up to make sure that we had that kind of voice in government. The extension will be with the same operator, Voi, and for the same schemes that was approved by DFT, and it will cover the same geographical area and have the same maximum number of e-scooters. But I think there are challenges, but they've been an incredible success for us in Bristol, and we look to making them permanent. Okay, on to the main items now. So agenda item 8, which is youth zones, funding request. I'm going to bring this report, which signals the start of the project that looks to deliver a youth zone centre in South Bristol. And this was one of our key manifesto pledges. And this really will signal a huge step forward for our youth provision in the city, particularly for young people in South Bristol. And just while we're here, just want to thank Councillor Helen Godwin, for all the work she did on this, getting us to this stage. So engagement on the proposal has started, and I'll really encourage people and councillors to share the link, and a tweet will be going out during Cabinet today with that link, so you can pick it up and share it amongst your networks. It's really important that we get the views of young people and hear early doors what they want to see and how they want the youth zone to operate. It's important we get local views and knowledge. And that's one of the reasons why this engagement at an early stage is so important. And just reflecting on the quality of youth provision that is going to be available. I was just sharing with my team earlier on and about the first time I went into Broad Plain Youth Club with Dennis Stinchcombe, Riverside. 12-foot snooker table, boxing ring, table tennis bats with rubber on both sides, not just wood. You remember those days, Craig? Wood. Quality. And for us kids around Easton, St. Paul's that used the place, it lifted us up. We had a pride in our place. We were taken seriously. We were respected and went away in a van. It was good too. So giving people world-class facilities, I think, is a massive intervention. I and so many people have benefited from that when it's happened. This paper looks for approval in principle to spend up to £4.2 million. That's half the estimated capital spend for the youth zone, subject to the project feasibility study and, of course, the final business case. The paper allocates £350,000 to develop this feasibility study. And it also confirms Onside as our delivery partner, who we're really excited to work with, having seen firsthand their work and the results they've got in other cities around the country. So once completed, of course, Youth Moves will be running it, and they've been fantastic for South Bristol, and they'll bring that expertise into the running of the new facility. So we've received one statement and 4 questions on this item. The statement is from Len Wyatt. So can I welcome you to the meeting, Len? You have 1 minute, and I'll give you a 10-second hand up when you've got 10 seconds to go, okay?
Thank you very much. I hope to do it a bit quicker than that. My name is Len Wyatt, but I'm actually representing Norwest Future, and that's a local organisation on the Norwest estate. 4 points. Yes, there is a desperate need for youth provision in South Bristol. The points I'm raising from here on are about improving the consultation which is currently underway, because there is also a need to have a nuanced conversation with those residents in Inns Court about the implications of the centre, whether they live nearby or even potentially, and nobody knows exactly where it is, next door. We would urge the Cabinet to ask the developers to actually start talking to those people from here on. Because basically, if you look at that timetable, there's a problem. The chances of fitting extra stuff in is not known. But we have already offered dates and events to developers to come and talk to local people. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Len. And I think talking to local people about whatever we do has to be at the heart of any plan. So as you've heard, some of the money's gone into getting that engagement process ready. So I'm sure there'll be plenty of opportunity for that. Let's go on now to our question. The first question from Councillor Tim Rippington.
Do you want me to read the question, Mayor, or do you?
Yeah, go on then, Tim. Yeah.
Thanks. It is fantastic news to see South Bristol youth zones going ahead, and I'm sure it will be an excellent investment for the future of young people in South Bristol. We know that investment in youth has, been sucked out of the area for a long time. So The area being looked at for the zone in the current consultation is a long way from Brislington East, however, and I'm not sure how much impact it's likely to have on youth provision in my ward, which is always top of the list when we talk to local residents. We have an excellent opportunity at the moment for some additional youth provision in St Anne's House, which is being managed by Bricks on a meanwhile lease from the council at the moment. So I'm hopeful this provision will be able to expand and continue over the next few years. That's the provision in St Anne's House, and I'm wondering if we can look at what links could be made between the two sites going forward.
So I wouldn't comment on what is or isn't happening in St Anne's House at the moment, but what I would say is whenever we've the model that we've wanted for many years now and has kind of been a bit inhibited for various reasons from pursuing, is to make sure whenever investment goes into any major facility that there's partnership working with youth providers right across the city, particularly if we're getting a world-class facility like this with the climbing, the arts, the boxing and what have you going on in there. It has to be connecting to youth facilities across the city, and as it becomes entrenched, the idea is that it will support the establishment of beachheads, as it were, of youth provisions in other parts of the city as well, to make sure that the benefits are being spread. Do you have a supplementary?
No, that's pretty much what I wanted to hear. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. So our next question, Councillor Pearce, but I think Councillor Pearce hasn't been able to come today. Okay, the next question is from Councillor Townsend.
So my first question is, if the youth hub is achieved on this site, who owns the assets of the lands and the building when it's complete?
So the freehold will be owned by the local authority, and the intention is that any lease in the premises would be a 125-year peppercorn lease. The long lease would be in the name of the Youth Zone charity, which is currently called Youth Moves.
Shall I ask my second one?
Do you have a supplementary?
Well, I don't know. Shall I ask my second one and then see where we get to? Okay. So Onside is involved with this, from what I've read from the papers, and I quote that they emerged from 3 Victorian businessmen and church ministers who established a Bolton Leeds Lads Club in 1889. The trust deeds for Onside state that deposits or investment funds, that the trustees can invest these in a manner which they see fit, and any philanthropic donors can choose to remain anonymous. So I suppose my question for you is, how do you ensure that in the initial stages of getting this up and running, that philanthropic funds has come from ensuring social and environmental justice?
Yeah, well, I must admit, I haven't seen any of the papers from the 1800s around this project. I've been working with more recent documentation. But I will say there are 12 of these across the country that we've had an opportunity to see and witness. For example, up in the Manchester Youth Zone, it's in an area of serious deprivation. The ward is located in as 16% unemployment, 48% of people in poverty. It's open 7 days a week, 4,000 kids attend. There's a kitchen, boxer gym, and all the rest of it. So one of the reasons we didn't just grab the model, one of the reasons we began having conversations and exploring the potential of the model for Bristol is because of the benefits we saw being gained by cities like Manchester and other parts of the country. Onside themselves have a gift acceptance policy overseen by the trustees through their due diligence committee. It's registered with the fundraising regulator, and our gift acceptance policy and fundraising activity is aligned to their code of fundraising practice. The Youth Zone charity that would be created would adopt a similar policy, and Bristol City Council will have a seat on the Youth Zone Charity Board to ensure all policies developed and adopted by the Youth Zone charities suit Bristol City Council interests and further the objectives of the Youth Zone charity and ultimately benefit young people in Bristol, bringing life chances and all the other things that we so desperately need in Bristol. So the Youth Zone's charity boards will be made aware and the identity of all funders of significance and will ensure their funding is acceptable, according to this policy. But as with all of these, with all schemes, it's not unusual for me to say. My encouragement is to get involved. There's an opportunity. We can step up, we can help make it real, and we can help make sure that just like the thousands of young people in Manchester have benefited, thousands of young people in Bristol benefit from having world-class facilities made available to them.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I don't think anyone's challenging you about having a youth centre down in Knoll West. 1889 is actually the 19th century, not the 18th century. So
I thought I said 1800s, but there you go.
Yeah, but it's 1900, isn't it? 1889. You've spoken about the gift acceptance policy. What about the trustees' ability to invest in funds in a manner they see fit? Did you have any response about that?
No, I mean, other than having just gone over all the safeguards, that are in place and the protocols that will sit around the existence of this charity, I think that's as far. I mean, I take that as a good safety barrier around what's going to be going on here. As I said, our focus is on getting world-class facilities for our children and young people in the city, and trying to make that work. Constructive contributions to that conversation are absolutely welcome, Councillor Townsend. I think you have another supplementary if you wanted it. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so having worked through that, it's just to say, I wanted to invite any cabinet members to comment on this. No, it just so happens that Helen Holland is on leave, who would have been a perfect cabinet member, having represented the area of Bristol for 30 years. I think she was incredibly keen just to say just how important it would be for young people in Bristol South, and having been a champion of the south of the city as well. I think she's particularly pleased that the first youth zone is actually being delivered in South Bristol, as well, sending the right signals about how we rebalance and build an inclusive city. So it's all left for me to now to just say is I approve the recommendations to set out in the report, which will now be displayed on the screen. Okay, on to agenda item 9. Smaller cabinet today, so a lot of papers come to me. And this is our Children's Independent Fostering Agency Framework for South Central. And I'm again bringing this report, so which seeks approval to join the South Central Consortium to commission the new framework contract and purchase independent fostering agency placements. We have a statutory requirement to meet the sufficiency duty, as we should and as we must. Of the 523 children and young people currently in foster care, 42% are living in independent fostering agency placements. The annual spend on independent foster agency placements is around £7 million. Before the end of our current contract, we're looking to join the South Central Consortium. They're in the initial stages of recommissioning a new IFA framework, which will play an important role in supporting us to meet our sufficiency duty. Commissioning as a larger consortium of authorities with a significantly bigger market share than our current consortium will allow us to meaningfully engage with and manage the market, whilst enabling us to achieve efficiencies in the purchasing and development of services. And this should lead to a reduction in the number of spot placements we need to purchase. Foster carers, whether employed directly by Bristol City Council or by private agencies, are increasingly important and valued in giving our children secure and loving homes. And we have one statement on this item, and that's from Councillor Tim Kent to Councillor Kent.
Thank you. It's just a very brief statement, and we are, I think, supportive of the proposal, but just to make you aware of one of those possible unintended consequences, which could be obviously if we join a new framework, placements which we did have might not be members of that framework. So I guess we just wanted to highlight that to you as Cabinet. I'm sure officers are already working on that, but to ask if we can doubly make sure that those placements we already have in use, that we want to hold on to, that we're going to work with them to bring them into the new framework. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, and we really appreciated that statement. We already sent it on this afternoon to Anne James to just raise the potential of that unintended consequence and make sure we're on top of it ahead of time. So really appreciate your warning on that front. Actually, what we can do is if we ask for a response to come to you on that, even though it is a statement, we'll ask for a response to come just to say it's been registered and what we'll do to mitigate that risk. We've had nothing else on fostering. Can I ask for any comments from Cabinet members? Okay. Well, I'll just finish this item myself by saying just one is a huge thank you to our foster families within Bristol. We have always been thankful, but I think that minds were sharpened over the last 18 months when we just saw just how challenging it's been and how committed our fostering families have been for our children in the care system throughout COVID. And I want to thank those foster families, those fosterers who were unable to continue with fostering because of their own vulnerabilities during COVID and had to step away and would have been feeling maybe their own kind of sensitivity around that. But I want to thank you for all you've done and your commitment. And I want to thank those people who stepped up over the last 18 months as we put an appeal out for more foster families to provide children, young people in Bristol with homes. And I think we certainly have grown in our appreciation of fostering as a service for Bristol. Now it's left to me to approve of the recommendations as set out in the report, which will now be displayed on the screen. Okay, so let's go on to agenda item 10, which is Inpatient Detox and Stabilisation contract. And I'm going to bring this report also, which asks for Cabinet approval to award a contract for inpatient detox and stabilisation services through to 2025. The service, which is also known as the ASA unit, helps some of our most vulnerable citizens, including pregnant women, those with physical and mental health comorbidities, people who are homeless, and those who have recently left custody. It is a specialised service that provides medically directed care in hospital settings, and we need effective treatment options for those with alcohol and substance use issues. Between June 2019 and May 2020, there were 1,442 incidents where alcohol or drug use was the main cause for attending A&E. So this is an issue of both of personal justice, inclusion and fairness and compassion, but it's also an issue of critical importance to the capacity of our National Health Service. But by awarding this contract, we can ensure stability of services for those who rely on support from inpatient detox and stabilisation, and that we don't require service users to have to move out of Bristol to access this service. So we haven't actually received any public forum in relation to this item. Can I ask any Cabinet members to comment who may wish to comment? No? So I'll just make one comment on this and just the importance of this. I've a number of people who have become friends, well, from my childhood as well, I guess, but I in my adult years, met people who've become friends who I've seen go on the journey from addiction to what you might call restoration, and all that's been involved in that journey, restored relationships with their children. One guy in particular, I remember we went out running one morning. I thought he was going to collapse after 150 meters. He went on to complete 5 or 6 half marathons, win the medals, send them to his children, and that was a pathway to reconciliation for him. And so I think what we are talking about here is clearly an important service for all the reasons we said, but just remembering the people that are on the other side of this and how it echoes out beyond the lives of the individual involved to the wider family and the restoration of human relationships. So just incredibly important area for us, and one that is constantly under pressure, but one that we are committed to stay on top of. So having said that, it now comes down to me to approve of the recommendations to set out in the report, which will now be displayed on the screen. Okay. So on to agenda item 11. I think I deserve a glass of water. And I'm bringing this item as well, which is the consultation on leisure investment options. So we are bucking a national trend in Bristol, because although we have a finite, which is a point we constantly make, the budget has limits, and it's declining. We are also proposing to invest in our facilities. And this report today sets out our draft strategy for leisure and sport. And we're stressing that we've two principles that really hold our thinking together in how we make our decisions that are really important for us. And actually, they're reflected in so many of the papers that come before. The last paper, the paper about the care system, and future papers actually including domestic violence. One is areas where usage is high and our investment reaches the highest numbers of people. And the second is impact on deprivation, to provide investment in areas where our less wealthy citizens use and support leisure facilities. And that's absolutely essential to tackling the health inequalities that have been so exposed, particularly over the last 18 months. I'm always a little bit reluctant to say that. It's not that they've been exposed, it's that some people who didn't see them in the past or didn't prioritise them now see them and prioritise them. Most people have already been aware of the kind of inequalities. But it's important for us that we get the most impact from every pound we spend on our health, on the health and fitness of our population from the investment we have. And to work out how we do this, our consultants have reviewed all the leisure facilities in the city and shared with us the findings of their work. In summary, we will now go to consult on options to invest in Hallfield, Eastern and South Bristol Pool. All are hugely popular, incredibly well used, have great reach and have a lot of potential to do more. And along with Henbury and Hengrove, which have long-term funding models in place, this means we'll have a core offer of 5 top-class leisure centres that are spread out across the city and serve and reach and serve areas of high deprivation. The work done by the consultant shows that Jubilee Pool and Kingsdown Leisure Centre are small, ageing facilities that do not actually have the visitor numbers needed to justify the level of investment it would take to modernise them. We have, in the search for solutions, consulted on options for Jubilee Pool, and as a result, the community group that have been campaigning on the pool are looking at a community plan for operation of the pool. And we really are delighted that the community have now submitted an expression of interest for the transfer of that asset. And we're looking forward to the work done over the coming months to build that case and keep it open. But this is now Kingsdown's opportunity to identify, to work out if there are similar alternative ways to keep the facility open. But a decision ultimately won't be made until after consultation. The draft strategy will be published as part of the consultation, but it is summarised in the report. I stress no decision is being taken on the options today. This is an agreement to start a consultation, and your views are welcome in shaping our final decisions. So we do have 19 statements on this item and 3 questions in relation. The first 15 statements are from members of the public. Cabinet have received and noted these statements, and I'll also check if they are present to read their statements. So I'm going to go through the names, and if you're here, please indicate, and you'll have 1 minute to make your statement. So Brian Glasson, Carol Lader, Monica Smith, Keith Williams, Will Robinson, Cicely Postan, Claire Hartland, Simon Baines, Dr. Yasmin Ishmael, Neil Jacobs, Juliet Collins, Finn Kramer Jacobs, Carol Goff, Helen Kramer, Lewis Kramer Jacobs. Okay, so we also have 4 statements from councillors on this item, including one from Councillor Ed Plowden, who's unable to attend the meeting. This statement has been noted. The next is from Councillor Philippa Hume. Oh, I think Philippa's not with us at the moment. Okay, the next one is from Councillor Gary Hopkins.
Thank you, Mayor. The consultation that went out before was on Jubilee Pool was unfortunately a hatchet job. I'm glad that partway through there was a relenting on the determined closure plan, and although this present plan actually suffers from the fact that it will not provide the amount of water space that's needed across the city to meet standards, Jubilee Pool will survive in very good form. It's been reopened after local pressure, and it's booming. And basically, it would be doing an awful lot more if the operators could get the staff that they need to actually expand the services further. What we want to make certain of, I have a partial assurance from yourself, that when the council contract runs out in March, there will not be an attempt to close it at that time, and that we will have long enough for the community asset transfer to actually take place.
Just 10 seconds.
We have a similar situation in Redcatch Park, which was rescued by local volunteers, is now a great functioning facility, and the asset transfer there is blocked because the council legal services can't do what's required. Okay, so basically, can we move forward rather than going backwards again?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hopkins. The next statement is from Mohammed Makawi, Councillor Mohammed Makawi.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. It's a joint.
Sign, okay.
Sorry?
When
No
10
problem,
seconds.
yeah. No, it's a joint statement, and Councillor Bolton is going to read it. I got a question. My question is, what assurance are there for the residents of Cotton and the Kingsdown Sports Centre about the future of their facilities?
So I'm just going to take, because I had you down for a statement as well, so I'll take the statement as merged into the question and just take it as a question. So we're undertaking a public consultation where residents' feedback will be taken into consideration, as we do with consideration, will feed into the decision that's ultimately made. For those facilities that this report says can't justify the scale of investment that's needed to modernise them and therefore would stop operating, we are open to the possibility of transferring them to another commercial operator at zero cost to the council, or to be run by the community. And so if you wanted to support the community in taking on the running of this facility, just like we're exploring with the Friends of Jubilee, and have very successfully done so with the Ardar, a trust in Hallfield, we'd welcome it, and we would happily introduce you to those people to talk about going on that journey, organising and putting the organisation together to make it, to come up with some solutions. Did you have a supplementary question?
Thank you. No, that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. The next 2 questions are from Councillor Fodor. Present. Okay, Councillor Fodor's not here. Okay, I think that's it then for questions at the moment. Can I ask any Cabinet members if they had any comments on this item? Tom?
I think really I just want to welcome the consultation and note as more as a ward councillor and perhaps cabinet member that one of the potential options is for investment in the Hallfield Leisure Facility, which I know me and you visited very recently. So thank you.
And a fantastic facility it is too. Okay, but I got knackered out playing football up there. It took me about 3 days to recover. Okay. Well, thank you for your statements. For those that weren't here, we have those statements. Thank you for your question and your contribution. So it's now down to me to approve the recommendations set in the report, which are now being displayed on the screen. Okay, next up, agenda item 12, the end user compute and deployment services. And I'm going to ask Councillor Craig Cheney to bring this item.
Thanks, Marvin. It's another one of those that doesn't sound very exciting, but it is quite important. So, as you'll know, the COVID pandemic fundamentally changed how we work and the technology that we use. We could not have anticipated the increase in demand for IT equipment or for the wholesale changes in the way we work prior to that. This paper ensures that the Council has access to a compliant contract in place for our IT devices such as laptops, tablets and workstations. It also manages the storage of equipment we have procured but which we are not yet ready to deploy. By having the contract in place, we are able to be flexible in how we purchase IT equipment and ensure we have a cost-effective approach in place that meets the changing needs of the Council. So I'm asking us to approve the use of the existing uplift of the XMA contract by 0.5 million, as well as increasing it by an additional 363,000. This will authorise the Director of Resources in consultation with myself to incur the additional spend.
Thanks, Craig. We have no public forum on this. Any Cabinet members want to comment? Just going to say, as you said there, this isn't something people necessarily get excited about, but this is the nuts and bolts of the organisation and service continuity and building resilience, and we've just seen how important it is during the COVID period as well to be able to be on top of our tech and our IT. So let me hand back to you now, Craig, to take the decision, which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
Yeah, thanks, Marvin. I mean, it's one of these things, isn't it? We were able, during a pandemic, to deliver telephone responses to residents and citizen services from people's houses, which is just an unbelievable thing that we could never have imagined in another life. So in terms of the decisions to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you very much. And to agenda item 13, Microsoft Dynamics Agreement, Director Ward, and this is again with you, Craig.
Yeah, it's kind of not quite more of the same, but it's in the same space. So Microsoft Dynamics, which we implemented as part of the IT transformation program, is a large-scale technology platform that is used for a wide range of business services and is a key strategic platform for the Council. It forms a key part of our channel strategy, reducing costs and ensuring citizens can access the services that they want, when they want, and in a way that best suits them. It's currently being used to transform our citizen services by implementing a single login to access services, simplified forms to request and notify us, and improved access to information about the progress of a call. It will dramatically reduce the training time needed for contact centre agents and allow us to deliver a one-stop shop for all council inquiries. In the future, Dynamics can be expanded to deliver a wider range of services and will be part of our considerations for application rationalisation, moving away from niche products to an integrated suite of applications that meet our needs while reducing costs. This paper ensures that we have a compliant route to procuring Microsoft Dynamics licenses to support the channel strategy and digital strategy, and asks us to approve a further spend of 0.938 million and to note the existing spend of 0.655 million from June 2019 to August 2021.
Thank you, Craig. We have no public forum statements or questions on this item. Cabinet? Any other members? Okay, Craig, let me just hand back to you now to take the decision, which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you. 14 is Digital Transformation Programme. With you again, Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Marvin. So, digital transformation underpins how the Council uses technology to improve the way we deliver services and how services are accessed by our citizens. The phase of work finalises the technology improvements from the IT transformation programme to ensure we're able to benefit from the investment made. The programme of work will also deliver some immediate changes which will have a significant benefit and improved websites and improved telephony and contact centre solutions, both improving our citizen engagement, reducing costs and ensuring alignment to our citizen channel strategy. We will also engage with the specialist partners to help us define how we can drive down the cost of our IT systems and build a programme plan for future funding. I'm asking us to approve this £3.7 million investment, which is the first step in a series of pieces of work which we estimate could save up to £6 million per year from our IT and core budgets. Those detailed business cases still need to come forward, and I'm sure some of this will move, but we're confident that this investment will drive performance improvements throughout the council.
Thank you, Craig. We've had 4 public forum questions for this item. 2 are from Councillor Edwards, who's not able to attend and will receive a written response. The next 2 are from Councillor Heather Mack. No? Okay. So, in the absence of that, can I ask if any Cabinet members wish to comment on this item? Again, one of the areas that doesn't get the headlines but can leave you with sleepless nights if it goes wrong, and actually is absolutely essential to, like I said, our continuity and meeting the needs of some of the most vulnerable people in the city. But let me hand back to you now, Craig, to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
Yeah, thanks, Marvin. In terms of the decisions to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you. So agenda item 15, the 2021-22 period 3 and 4 finance report. Craig?
The purpose of this report is to provide an update on how the council has delivered against its financial measures using its capital and revenue resources, noting any changes to budgets, reporting spend under delegation and accepting new grant funding received. We continue to report monthly to ensure regular oversight and also transparency for the public in how we are using funding we have available. We are managing the financial impact of COVID separately from our ongoing core services, and provision has been made in the budget for additional expenditure and income losses as a result of COVID. The report also outlines allocation of some of that COVID funding within adult social care to support our critical providers across the city. There are significant pressures outlined in the report, both in managing the COVID impact and also managing ongoing spend, such as delivery of savings and increased pressure on social care support. We are in the process of updating our medium-term financial plan and will come back with more information on the longer-term outlook in November. There continue to be huge pressures in the dedicated schools grant, with a forecast deficit at the end of the year of £21 million. I want to thank the work colleagues across the education sector. I want to thank the colleagues across the education sector for the work they are doing to support the critical actions for those with special educational needs, and we will continue to take action to ensure funding is available to meet the needs of these children. In a risk report later on in the agenda, a key risk remains delivering the ambitions of our capital programme. This report updates on progress of this, and we are forecasting some continued slippage this year. Whilst improving our delivery, we must also acknowledge that the first 4 months of the year, £43 million has been invested in various schemes across the city to deliver new homes, improve our highways and various other ongoing schemes. The report also delegates authority to be part of the regional bid as part of WECA for a regional transport settlement due to short timelines to submit. However, full detail and approval will be brought back to Council when ready. Full details of the forecast are covered within the report.
Thank you, Craig. And we've had no public forum statements or questions on this item. Cabinet members? No? Okay. Let me hand back to you now, Craig, to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
In terms of the decisions being made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Okay. So what I'd like to do is just change the order of the agenda and bring your items forward, if that's okay, Craig. If I can give you a bit of notice to get your head together.
Yeah.
So you've got agenda item 19, to which there is no public forum. But then you have agenda item 22, which does have public forum, with Susan Aldry and Councillor Katie Grant. You're both here, so we can bring them forward and get the questions, okay?
Yeah.
So let's go to agenda item 19, which is procurement of new case management system for legal services.
Yeah, so I mean, there's another IT one. So at the moment, well, obviously the Council Legal Service provides legal advice and support across the council. The current case management system has been in use for the last 10 years, and there's been a number of issues with functionality, and is also not being maintained by the provider anymore. It also doesn't fit with our the changes in our IT platform, so we're struggling to get it to be compatible, to be Windows 10 compatible. So, and it's currently maintained on BCC premises, which is sort of contrary to our strategy to go cloud-based. So essentially we're asking for £515,000 to deliver a new IT case management system, which will improve their ability to work. And in fact, we stop having a system that falls over, as is the current.
Thank you, Craig. As I said, there was no public forum on this item. Cabinet, anyone to comment on this? No, okay. So let me hand back to you, Craig, to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
In terms of the decisions we made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Okay, so let's now go to agenda item 22, which is the Corporate Risk Management Report, Q1, which is 21-22. Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Marvin. So this is the Corporate Risk Management Report. It summarises the key risks to achieving the key objectives we set as an organisation. We report every quarter on the current risk and actions we are taking to reduce this to tolerable levels. And this report sets out the risks during the first 3 months of this financial year. Our 3 critical risks remain unchanged from the previous quarter, which relate to the delivery of affordable homes to meet the needs of Bristol, delivering the ambitions of our capital investment, and also safeguarding the vulnerable children. Actions are being taken against all our risks to reduce the impact and likelihood, and full detail on all the risks are provided within the report. It's just for noting, so I'm pleased to recommend it to Cabinet.
Thank you. So we've received a statement and 2 questions from Susan Audrey and a question from Councillor Katie Grant. So, Suzanne, can I offer you the chance to read your statement first? I'll raise my hand when you have 10 seconds to go of your minute, okay?
Okay, thank you. So my concern is that in chasing the housing numbers, we're signalling to developers that they can cut corners in relation to space for children's play. And an example of that is the 17-storey development at Tottenham Bridge, which has got a child yield of 40. It's sandwiched between the muddy, fast-flowing River Avon banks and the busy Bath Road dual carriageway, but they haven't given any ground-level public space at all for children's play. It was approved, given that there was private space on balconies and the roof terraces. And now, citing that scheme, we're faced with another application that fails to provide for children and is saying it can't do that, but there are balconies and there are roofs to play on. So I'm just worried this is being replicated across the city, and I'm urging you to take it seriously. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Would you like to ask your question now?
Yeah, my question's for Tom Renard, the Cabinet Member for Housing. So first of all, congratulations on your appointment to the Cabinet. So I just wondered what importance you actually place on the Urban Living SPD, which has got some stuff in it about the importance of children's play, given that you're having to balance this with the risk of not providing enough affordable homes.
I'll start. Other cabinet members may wish to join in. Obviously, it's a formal planning document, so as a supplementary planning document, so it has formal recognition in the processes of the planning process that developers have to follow. As you rightly identify there, the risk of not delivering the affordable housing that Bristol needs is not one we're willing to take, and so we need to think about what's the balance that we need to achieve. And there's going to be some work that we're going to be launching later this year, where we encourage people to engage in conversation. We've got 16,000 people on the housing waiting list, so we're going to need to take some radical action to get that addressed. And you know, we do want to do that as a city, but we also want to get things moving. So I think I'll probably leave it there.
Nicola?
I just wanted to reinforce how Urban Living SPD was playing out in terms of its use by development control committees ahead of the election this year, and obviously its future iterations and use. I think it's fair to say, Suzanne, that as we grapple with the dynamic between where we deliver the homes that this city needs, the Urban Living SPD will continue to evolve and grow. And I think that's the reality of how we actually grapple with the challenge that you're articulating there about delivering that housing need. We did bring the first child-friendly city conference to Bristol on a national platform, and have been actively discussing with other child-friendly ambassadors across the country about how do we actually manage that tension you're describing there. But we equally have the challenge for adults in terms of their relationship with open space in this city in areas where we are densely populated. And so I just wanted to come back to you on the example you just used of Tottenham Tower, as you call it. The reality is, as you know, that it's subject to a transformation of the whole of this area of St Philip's. And so I think it's challenging for me to just think about that building in isolation, because it is an area of great change where there is currently, you rightly identify, low amounts of open space. But that is true of residents in Barton Hill, that is true of residents in Lawrence Hill, and actually what we're trying to do here is use areas of growth and regeneration to address that deficit today. So I don't think it's as straightforward as you can point to a single scheme and say, well, you shouldn't build there because of that challenge, because we've equally got those challenges about building across the city. But the full council meeting last week, plays into that beautifully in terms of where do you deliver those homes. And so I just encourage development management to continue to consider how these areas of the city will transform in the coming years.
Do you have a supplementary, Susan?
Yes, I do actually, because when this was discussed, the issue, the tower was discussed, it was raised about children's play, and I can see that you keep diverting this away. So there needs to be some recognition of the importance for parents too, of being in a flat with just a balcony, or saying, well, up you go and play on the roof while I cook dinner, while we're bringing in sort of real people into this. So I really want people to concentrate on this idea that, yes, build, but where do children come into this when you're actually saying there's going to be 40 children living in this building, with all the complications for the mental health and well-being of families that live under those circumstances? I guess that's a statement rather than a question. But so, shall I go on to my second one again? Please. To just say what measures are in place? Tom, although you said the Urban Living SPD is a planning document, at the meeting where they approved that tower, I was told by a Labour councillor who voted for it that unfortunately it didn't have any weight, that the Urban Living SPD doesn't have weight. Could you clarify that for me, so that the definition of what they want to see for children's play will be enforced?
So I don't hold planning, but I'll have a go. I think for me, when things come through planning, go to planning committee, it's also about the trade-offs, isn't it? So it's about what do you accept as acceptable development, and what might not quite be where you want it to be, but you accept that as, well, this is going to have to be good enough. And it's the same with any development. We do need to think about amenity, space, parks, green space, all those things. We also need to get homes built as well, and that's going to mean trade-offs. The motion that came to full council last week talked about protecting green spaces, for example. Really important. The reality of that, though, is, well, okay, so we don't build on green spaces, but we have to build higher. We have to build more densely. Those are the trade-offs, because we've got to deal with a growing population and also a target that's probably going to be forced upon us by central government over the housing delivery we've got to do over the next 20 years.
Nicola, you come in.
Sorry, Marvin. Just as a statement of fact, that a supplementary planning document that goes through Cabinet does carry material weight in development control. Just to be absolutely clear, I don't know who you spoke to, I don't know what the discussion was, I was not there, but just as a matter of record, that is factually incorrect, and that is the whole purpose of driving planning policy and further guidance through forums like Cabinet. Thanks.
Supplementary, Susan?
Just to say, Nicola, thank you very much. That's really helpful, because I was genuinely worried that although it was a wish list, it didn't hold weight. So it's brilliant that it does hold weight. Marvin, I guess you're holding the planning brief at the moment then, so I don't know whether this conversation keeps going away from what I'm trying to say, is if you're building a tower, where, is there something that can be done, whether that's one floor that's given over to children's play, or, rather than just saying we have to build there, my question is about the provision for children with, families with children, and whether you feel there's any leeway, rather than just saying it's a trade-off and sorry, we can't do anything.
Yeah, I mean, the point about the context isn't moving away from it. It is the way the world is, rather than the way we'd like it to be. I think we can certainly talk to planners about what provision is made within their developments. It's something that we do. Bearing in mind that one of the first, I think it was the first item we talked about today, when we talk about the importance of children and children's play today, was our youth zone. £4 million we're putting in there, one of 2 youth zones. We talked about those being connected to youth provision around the city, including areas that that are underserved, where we need to get beachheads of youth provision. So Helen, as well, when she was in cabinet, led fantastic work, specific cabinet brief on children, and also making sure that the regeneration, the development of Bristol, which she worked a lot with Nicola on, was child friendly. Now, there's a lot that goes into that, but it means safe, it means good for families, it means more hours, but it also means that there's spaces to play, as well. But I will just catch, because I think phrasing, it's a political game, and it's not saying you're doing it, but I had to pick someone the other day. When we talk about chasing numbers, we're not chasing numbers, we're trying to deliver for the city. And numbers, unfortunately, are a way of measuring how many homes we've actually delivered. We have to measure, because we've got 16,000 on the waiting list. We've got probably more than 1,000 in temporary accommodation now. So we do have to use numbers. That doesn't cheapen it, and it doesn't make it abstract and impersonal and devoid of humanity. It's just what we are working with. And we're not telling anyone they can cut corners. We have been quite blunt, actually, I would say, in ways that aren't always in the public domain, about the kind of people we want to work with, about signing up to the Global Sustainable Development Goals, which has a specific SDG around children within them, as well. So we're not cutting corners. When you describe the muddy river as well, the development, it is on the edge of a muddy river, but one of the things they're looking to do is put a cantilevered platform that actually brings the river back into access, a river that's been lost to the city. And we're looking at a pathway that runs under the bridge and on into the city as well. This is quite special to make the river accessible again. And like Nicola says, it's part of a wider regeneration plan. There has to be a first building, there has to be a second building. But ultimately, there will be lots of regeneration around there that will be, a fantastic part of the city that we aim to be permeable, accessible, to be part of a new centre, sustainable, connected to our heat networks, and well, now we know we can do it well, the water source heat as well. So all that will be going on. But there is a very basic challenge for us, and I am just going to abuse the microphone to take it, because again, I mentioned at full council last week, Bristol is 42 square miles. The population is 460,000. The population is going to grow up to 550,000 by 2050. We're already a city of inequality with 10 areas in the top 1% most deprived. That is the raw material we are working with. That raw material ain't changing. So everything we do fits on that limited geographical space. We ain't getting 43 square miles, 48 square miles, we're getting 42. What we have to do is look at floor space. And I took part in a seminar last week, actually with the World Economic Forum panel I was on, and we were talking about sustainable development. Again, I know I've had a lot of people, green space and all that type of stuff, but then they're saying, don't build here, don't build there, don't build high, don't build out. Where do you build then? So on the panel, actually, there's a study that we were presented with on sustainable development, looking at over 150 cities around the world. And what they talk about, and you can find this report on the World Bank pages, is do you do pancakes or do you do pyramids? All right? Pancake development happens in under-sourced country. It's flat and it sprawls. And you can classic global south cities where you get the unofficial settlements happening, this chaotic, and the consequences for sustainable development are poor. The alternative, although clearly there'll be some nuance on this, is pyramid development, where you build in and up, where you do look for sustainability, you do try and reduce the people's dependency on transport networks, you maximize the potential for active travel, you try and build efficiencies into life systems. Now, well, you can shake your head and that's fine, but if... Okay, I am... Okay. Yeah, but you are. But the point is, children will be inheriting the world we've either put over tipping point or we have not. Children will inherit the world we've either concreted over with everyone with a back garden and they have no green space to play in, or they will not. So our challenge is to build the kind of city that our children will inherit and will mean that life is sustainable on this planet. We cannot get away from the fact that the population is growing. Now, I would love to have every child with a back garden like they have in some parts of the city, where there's room for, a goal net and people can roll around and have their own trampoline in it. But with a growing population in limited geographical space, that is just not physically possible. Our challenge, therefore, is as we do build more densely and do look at a more of a pyramid-type development, which is in line with the needs of a world in crisis, that we make sure those developments are as good as possible and the resources we place around those developments are good for the people who live in those developments. But at some point, I appreciate the point you make about children, right? But at some point, you have to tell me, because we're talking as equals, where you would actually build. Do you want to sprawl or do you want to build in and up? Because the only alternative to not doing either of those is not to build. And then we have another consequence of continuing to not have enough homes for a growing population. But unfortunately, that's the challenge that we face. And it's not one of our making, but it's the world we have rather than the world we'd like it to be. But I'm sure you'll come back with more questions in the future, and we'd welcome that. Okay. So we have a question now from Councillor Grant as well. So would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. So yes, mine is just a sort of a broad question on the corporate risk management report. In Appendix A of the report, reference to climate change is mentioned as a key potential challenge to organisational resilience rather than an entire risk area in its own right. My question is that in the context of our city declared climate emergency, and actually especially in light of your really interesting report, Marvin, just now on C40 and the efforts being made to get adequate finance in place for cities, including Bristol, to do what they need to do to get to net zero, why is the risk that the City Council will not meet those emission targets quite granularly year by year until 2030 not being measured as a threat risk?
So, first of all, the corporate risk register actually sets out the strategic risk to the organisation in delivering the ambitions we set out in the corporate strategy. It isn't there in some sense to list every risk in the city. Climate change is clearly a huge risk, and I've just been sharing about the context for the work we do, which is why we declared a climate emergency. But it's also why we have agreed the One City climate strategy. But the reason is that climate change in and of itself is not a single risk. It will be manifest in smaller risks. Well, not smaller, they'll be consequential, but it will cause events to happen that we do record, and that will impact on our organisational resilience. Flooding, for example, is one that's noted in the report. So just putting climate, it's all. We don't have a risk on terror attacks, for example, in there, and yet that's a risk for us in this as well. So let me offer you a chance to a supplementary. Craig may want to come in on as well because it's in his brief as well.
No kind of particular supplementary. I mean, of course, I didn't mean we should be looking at the risk climate poses. I mean the risk of Bristol's existing commitments around not meeting those emissions reductions. So something that is more of a metric that we can put our hands on. I totally understand what you're saying about that being delegated out to different areas, and flooding is definitely featured, but it just felt there's something about an emergency that would make that, you'd think, a sort of high-level risk.
Well, this is stuff we measure, but there is, I will just say, we can talk after, there's a little bit of a mismatch, because remember, we were very careful from the beginning when we talked about climate emergency, which in a way it was brought to us was a risk we raised in it, that it focuses on Bristol City Council, right? But Bristol City Council is less than 7% of the city's emissions. So if all we do is spend our time firing in at Bristol City Council, we're leaving 93% of emissions untouched. So actually, the 2030 target is a city target, not a city council target. City target for carbon neutrality is 2025, which is not in your question here. So what we've been trying to do is to say, what we've been working with the city on is to say, how can we as a city get to that carbon neutrality, right? The One City plan, the One City climate strategy, the One City ecological delivery plan. And we've worked through that system. Now, that is a challenge, and it's actually something Craig, Tim, Borat, and I, and others will be working on, is how do you begin to measure city progress? We can't put University of Bristol NHS performance in our own risk register, although collectively we provide the city outcomes. And actually, one of the things that we are looking at is how do you develop metrics for outcomes from complex systems? And a complex system is that, what is it, 40% of emissions, 40% emissions from our buildings, for example, right? But we don't own all the buildings. How do we begin to develop the metrics to monitor how we are or not doing as a whole city, and then to find those points of contact? What I will say is, in terms of, and you'd be welcome to engage with them, again, it's one reason why we developed the Environment Board. It's not just us, it's got utilities on it, university, health service. It's why we have the Advisory Committee on Climate Change for us in Bristol as well. Bring in that academic expertise to that, which is not necessarily in the council or not wholly within the council, because remember, we are less than 7%. So it's the collective city response that is the real prize to be had here, not just what the council does and what the council puts in its risk register.
And I suppose that's the kind of the point, really. The fundamental point is it's like a boring process one almost, which is that this risk register represents the things that the council is going to do or is at risk of not being able to do because of extraneous factors. So in this case, we have a target, 2025, as Marvin mentioned. We're on track to hit that, and that therefore doesn't appear in the corporate risk register. It doesn't bubble up. It is there within risk within the council, but it doesn't bubble up to the corporate level. The citywide problem is a citywide problem. We are obviously tracking it through other boards, but it wouldn't be in the corporate risk register.
Okay, so I think we're at the end of that. So I think it's just as much as to me on that item to say Cabinet notes the recommendations as set out in the report, and which will now be displayed on the screen. Okay, let me go back 16. Yeah. Okay, thank you for allowing me to move the agenda around there, Craig, and bring your items forward. So now we're going to go back to agenda item 20, which is Integrated Community Equipment Services, contract extension. So as with previous reports, this contains an exempt appendix, and so please can I remind Cabinet members that any reference to exempt information will need to take place in exempt session. Cabinet are asked to note the officer executive decision taken on 20th of August 2021 to extend the existing Integrated Community Equipment Services contract for 6 months until the 1st of April 2022. These services are a statutory duty and make sure residents have access to specialist equipment to allow them to live independently, maximising their ability to live at home. Equipment provided under this contract can range to bathroom aids, through to beds, mattresses and hoists. Cabinet will be aware that we set out to enable adults in need to live independent lives in their own homes for as long as possible. Making sure people have access to the right equipment when they need it is a crucial part of delivering this. So Cabinet are therefore asked to note the decision to extend the contract so we can ensure this service isn't interrupted while officers complete the re-evaluation of the procurement exercise. So we've had no public forum on this. Any Cabinet member wish to comment? Okay, so... So Cabinet notes the recommendations as set out in the report and which will now be displayed on the screen. Yeah, I think I jumped ahead a little bit too much. So I'm going to go back to item 16 here, which is the Parks Capital Maintenance Programme. And this paper sets out additions we were making to our Parks capital budget to help us maintain our public green spaces and help make sure they are safe and accessible for residents. We're allocating funding to restore hard surfaces and walls in our parks and cemeteries, which will help us deliver projects like maintaining and renewing the Oldbury Court Riverside footpath and replacing the Halfpenny Bridge in Snuff Mills. This paper sets out funding to maintain the places where we mourn and remember in Bristol. This funding will help us deliver repairs to the roof at Camford, Crematorium and contribute to the upkeep of Avonview Cemetery and South Bristol Crematorium. I know Councillor Craig will be pleased that this paper also sets out funding to redesign and build the perimeter wall at St George's Park Boating Lake. Combined with funding from the area committee, we will be investing £475,000 in enhancing the lake for nature and making sure St George Park continues to be a significant city attraction and loved local park. Taken together, this paper asks Cabinet to invest in places which are so valued by residents, spaces where Bristolians can exercise, children and families can play, relax and remember. So we've received one public forum question on this item. That's from Councillor Annie Stafford Townsend. So can I welcome Councillor Townsend to the meeting? Would you like to ask your question?
Hi, yes. So it was just in reference to earlier on in the year for the budget, there was in Cabinet £24 million allocated to some parks, including Castle Park. So I just wanted to know how much has actually been allocated to Castle Park, because the Friends of Castle Park keep asking.
Well, it's the first time I've heard the question. I don't keep asking, but so in terms of me, we'll be able to give a complete number for the seal investment in Castle Park once the delivery plan has been completed. And during the 2021-22 budget, we identified opportunities to support areas of growth and regeneration, and this included Castle Park and the Froome Gateway. But this has to be done as part of the city centre, the whole area's redevelopment plan, so we can make sure we get as much, as alignment as we need to make sure it's as good as it possibly can be.
Are you able to give any kind of benchmark? Just because it's a part of £24 million, so it could be £24 million, or it could be £2.50. Like, how much of a part of £24 million can Castle Park expect to be allocated?
Yeah, I'm not going to, venture into a number here. It's not going to be the whole £24 million pounds. Just to put your, maybe you like that. I don't know. It won't be the whole amount. But what I'll say is I'll talk to the officers, and what we can do is share with you the timeline on when the wider plan will be developed. But obviously what goes into that wider plan will determine what it needs to be, and what it needs to be will determine the cost implications of what needs to, what needs to happen. So I'll make sure that they get a firm timeline to you. But we expect the whole planning process around this to be finished by October next year. So we'll be as we get closer to that date, we'll be in a stronger position to give you firmer numbers.
So October 22.
October 22. But I just don't want to set any hairs running with numbers floating around on Twitter at this point in the schedule. I prefer to get closer to the date and the time where we can be more clear on what the development, the project will be, and then we can be more certain about the numbers.
Okay, so just to be absolutely crystal clear, October 22 in terms of having the plan formulated, and then from then onwards to actually start doing works of some variety, hopefully. Is that the plan?
I mean, there'll probably be a bit of a gap between the plan being finished and the work starting, because then you have to go out and procure the contractors and stuff to get it done. But the aim is to have the plan finished by October 2022. We want stuff to be done yesterday. We'll be holding feet to fire on that. Mike, the chief exec, is sitting next to me. We've got that date. We said it publicly. So that's the idea. But then there'll be a procurement process we would expect.
Brilliant. If you can keep me in the loop as much as possible, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks for your question. Okay. Any Cabinet members like to comment on this item? Don.
Yeah, and just to say it's probably, excuse me, an appropriate point to register our thanks to parks officers who work all year round in all weathers. I popped in on the depot in Stoke Bishop the other day just to see them and ask after them. And I thought No Mow May was really spectacular this year. I don't know what it was like in other parts of the city because I was on Zoom a lot of it. But in my area, the parks were looking amazing. And the verges were looking amazing. And the response from residents, generally speaking, was really good. And I think that increased sensitivity to the environment and to ecology in the way that they're managing parks over what is hundreds and thousands of acres of the city is really important and should be commended. You know, it's not just about individual fields and whether we build on them or not, it's whether we manage those thousands of acres properly, and our Parks Department, whilst being really financially stressed, are making changes, really important changes.
Thanks, Don. And it is important to just acknowledge the work and the expertise of our staff. I think the council gets a hard time quite often when things go wrong, but our teams have done some incredible work for us in the city, over the years. Nicola?
And thanks, Marvin. Just to echo what Don said, but actually more relevant, I guess, to St George's Park itself, just a thank you to Asha, really, on behalf of the Friends of St George's Park. It's not actually in the ward I represent, but it's pretty close to where I live, and it's adjacent to my ward. Since the lake failed, there's been a huge amount of collective effort in the local community to understand how to actually bring that lake back to life and do it justice. It's been closed for many years now, and I actually think that the approach that the Friends of Group, the local community, Asha as a ward councillor, myself and the other St George councillors, looking over at Fabian there, have taken in terms of working together to try and find a sustainable future for that lake has been a really sort of positive experience to be part of in what was quite a challenging environment at first, because to close a path, a level path in the middle of a sort of destination park was not something any of us enjoyed. So I'm really pleased today to see a sustainable future for that lake, and I look forward to increasing the habitats and the general ecology of that site as well as we move it forwards.
Thank you, Nicola. Okay, so thank you for your comments, thank you for your questions. So it's down to me now to approve the recommendations as set out in the report, which will now be displayed on the screen. Okay, agenda item 17 next, which is with yourself, Don.
Thanks,
Active
Marvin.
Travel. So maybe I should give you a title like everyone else. Active DFT Active Travel Fund, Tranche 3.
Tranche 3. Thank you very much. This report shows our continued work to improve and install cycling infrastructure in Bristol. It authorises a bid for over £4 million to deliver cycling infrastructure, as well as expressions of interest for 2 other projects. As the report explains, 3 cycling improvement schemes are submitted. The first one is Upper Magdalen, Park Row, Colston Street and Queen's Road, which is a bundle of complex junctions in a really important area by our hospitals and a coach station, and 2 much smaller ones, Old Market pedestrian cycle improvements, £700,000. Sorry, the first one is 4.1 million, so that is the really the biggest of these by a long way. Old Market pedestrian cycle improvements, 700,000. Cottam Hill streetscape improvements, 350,000. The schemes will need to be delivered by March 2023, so we'll need to move quickly once the funding is received, so there will be consultation happening fairly soon. These projects are building on the successful street space work that kept Bristol moving during the pandemic. It will allow us to provide high quality permanent materials and formalise, subject to the consultation, to formalise what we've been doing as part of the streetscape. We're expected to overbid and demonstrate our ambitions in this area, which is not a problem for us because we've got lots of things we want to do and not enough money to do them. But it does highlight the challenges of a culture where local authorities bid into pots and cannot be certain what they'll get. Doesn't help with our planning very much. The 2 other pilot projects the paper asks for us to express an interest for are Livable Neighbourhoods and GP Prescribing Project. In line with our manifesto, we're already developing the first pilot livable neighbourhood in the east of Bristol. If successful, we will receive development funding of up to 100,000 to begin initial work on schemes. And also we'll be working on a GP prescribing social prescribing project, prescribing walking and cycling to patients based on the Family Cycling Centre in Hengrove. We're optimistic for these bids and very pleased to see supportive statements coming in to this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dom. We've had 4 statements in relation to this item which Cabinet members have noted. That's Mateusz Malinowski, Siobhan Martin and Charlotte Davis, all of whom are unable, emphasise that, to attend, to read their statements. Dave Redwell, not Dave, Steve Red. That's Zoom. I got to say, Dave he's probably watching actually, so Dave, hope you're doing okay. We've also received 5 questions. The first 2 questions are from Marley Bennett. Marley?
Thank you, Marvin. I'd like to state on the record that I welcome this. Appreciate what you were saying, Don, about it being frustrating. We have to bid for this funding and that making it difficult for planning. But, and also that funding's limited. So, I understand why Eastville's not included this time. Just my understanding is that there will be future tranches of this funding. Is that also how you see it? And can you offer any assurances that Eastville's likely to be included in future bids we put together?
Thanks, Marley. There will be a further tranche of active travel funding in 2022. In addition, we will be applying for funding under the 5-year City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement. That's via WECA. And we hope that will enable us to really start rolling out livable neighbourhoods across the city. That bid is just going in now via WECA, so we are very hopeful for a considerable sum of money via that. I'm sorry I'm not able to commit to anything in Eastville particularly. What I will say is that the Livable Neighbourhoods strategy is now being written. In fact, I got sent a final copy today, and we will be going out to consultation fairly soon, so people will be able to see it, have it in their hands. And Livable Neighbourhoods, part of the approach is very radical kind of engagement and co-design. So as soon as you've got that in your hands as local councillors, you'll better take it out to your residents, show them it, and then come back to us as officers and me as cabinet member and say, well, look, this is what we like, this is what we think might work in our area. And that is the raw material for us of the next stage. We are also developing a prioritisation strategy, and that will be included in the document, the Livable Neighbourhood Strategy, when it comes out. I haven't had a chance to read that yet because it came to me this morning. But most certainly, one of the very, very important things in that, as has been mentioned earlier in this meeting, is that the funds that we have available are there really to address the needs of our most deprived neighbourhoods. Thanks. Does that answer?
Yeah, that does, and that's really useful to hear. Just in supplementary to that question, I suppose. So you'll be aware of the Bristol to Bath railway path that offers a brilliant traffic-free route, which is used by thousands of sort of Bristolians every day, and there's a project currently being run by the Council and Sustrans in partnership to improve it. One of my concerns is that about how a lot of people have sort of anxieties using it, particularly at night, for concerns about their safety. I'm just wondering if you're able to offer any update into how the improvements on the path are going, and if there's anything further the council can do to assure people that particular path is safe, such as by, I don't know, installing CCTV or something similar.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a couple of meetings this week. I've got a meeting with Sustrans in a couple of days' time, just for them to update me on their One Path BS5 programme, which they should be actually starting on the ground fairly soon, but I want to check that is actually happening, and that should help to deal with some of the problems of the mixed usage that's going on there. Obviously, people going to school, children going to school, but also people doing quite speedy long-distance cycling on the same path. And we encourage everyone to behave respectfully of others, but we will also be doing some markings and things like that to remind people of that. There is also, and has been, a problem of some criminal behaviour on the path. I had a meeting with our operations centre a couple of days ago, and they'll be meeting with the police on Friday specifically to discuss this, so that we're planning ahead for the darker evenings. And the fact that obviously I've been discussing this with the operations centre would suggest that you would suggest the nature of the interventions that we are thinking of, certainly. But you know, we don't think it will be very easy for people to engage in criminal behaviour on that path this winter, should they be minded to, without being discovered. Let's put it like that.
Did you have your second question, Marley?
Yeah, I did, and thank you for that answer, Don, and that's really sort of encouraging to hear. My second question and my supplementary I was planning on asking were about the Liverpool Neighbourhoods Policy and also how councillors can feed into that, but I feel like you've partly answered that. I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to add.
Thank you, partly, but I can only reiterate it. As soon as that policy is in your hand, which I think will be hopefully December, perhaps a little later, then please read it and take it round your communities. It's not a policy for the centre of the city or for the edge of the city. Livable neighbourhoods is a concept, an approach, a methodology even, that we want to use across the city, and the objectives will be stated in there and everything, but we want all your residents to engage with it, and for you to take it as far as you can as local leaders, and then we will engage with you as officers according to the prioritisation process, which is obviously linked to the funding that we've got and our own capacity, but we will do as much as we can. Officers and myself are really, really keen on livable neighbourhoods as a way of addressing many of the different issues that we face now.
Thank you, Doc. Did you have a supplementary for that, Marley, or are you okay?
No, just to say thank you. I'll look out for that strategy in December. It'll be an early Christmas present.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marley.
Okay, so next up we have a question from Councillor Tim Rippington.
Thanks, Marvin. I'm sorry, Don, I'm pretty much going to make you say exactly the same things again with my question, I fear. Last week I brought a petition to full council signed by 91 residents of Wyndham Crescent calling for improvements to their neighbourhood to counter the disruption regularly caused by large numbers of visitors to Eastwood Farm. I know you're aware of this. The Transport Department has suggested Liverpool Neighbourhoods approach would be suitable, and I agree. I suppose the one thing I want to say here, it is a small self-contained area, but it has a lot of social housing, occupied by a significant number of people with mobility issues. So in line with what you were just saying there, Don, you know, my personal feeling is it's exactly the sort of area we should be concentrating on. So I would ask that we make this a priority area when we're drawing up our plans.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, it's not that it's Marley got me on my favourite subject really, and not you that's repeating anything. Yeah, absolutely. I will obviously look at that as part of the prioritisation process, but it certainly ticks a lot of boxes as far as I can see. But we'll work through this in the process in the way that we're going to do it, and I look forward to meeting with you again. I've just accepted your invite and look forward to having further discussions about Bristol East, and particularly the problems you've got down there with Eastwood Farm. And I think livable neighbourhoods is probably the best way to address that because of its holistic nature, rather than just dealing with one road and transferring the problem to somewhere else. We'll just take a look at the area. It will take a bit longer, perhaps, but I think it's the best way. But thank you.
Thank you, Don. Did you have a supplementary, Tim? Are you okay?
No, just kind of, I was going to apologise for banging on about this at full council and again here, but it's an area that has quite a lot of cynicism about council engagement and that kind of thing. So, that's why I keep bringing this back to the table, because I want these people to feel that we are actually engaging with them and sort of bring up their level of confidence in us a bit, really.
Certainly.
Okay, so next question we have is Councillor Fabian Breckles. Fabian, would you like to ask you a question?
Yeah, so basically, the area Cruise Hole Road, it's sort of a narrow stretch. I did manage to get some safety measures put in, traffic calming in the wider bit, which is sort of wide enough for 2-lane traffic. But there's a narrow bit which has only got wide enough barely for 1 lane of traffic. There's very little, and there's houses on both sides. There's very little pavement space, and residents have been contacting me saying, we need to do something about it. And I was just, want to know what, funding can be used for projects and what is earmarked, whether something from a tranche of this funding or the other bid that you're going for next year can be earmarked for this. Officers reckon it'll be about 100 grand.
Thanks, Fabian. Thank you for all your communications on this. You're as diligent as ever as a local councillor. I've also heard from, I think, Mr. Buxton and Emily Vickery. So there is a lot of local concern about the junction, Strawberry Lane, isn't it?
It's the stretch from about Strawberry Lane to sort of Lamb Hill, that sort of stretch.
It sort of comes down that hill and hits the Chapel Lane corner.
You basically you come along sort of the Winding Road into Cruise Hole Road.
Sorry, guys. We need to pin down the question and answer, that's all.
Oh, yes, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're welcome to come and have a look, is what I'd say.
Okay. The Cruise Hole Road is in the livable neighbourhood pilot for East Bristol. So, without question, addressing that issue will be the top of the list.
Okay.
That's what I'd like to hear, and my residents are very pleased. Great, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Fabian. Much appreciate the question. Next up, we have a question from David Wilcox. Not here? Okay. Okay, so thank you very much for that. Can I affect any of the Cabinet members to comment on this? Oh, Nicola?
All I want to say is that I'm delighted this paper is here, and to the point before about the risk register, this is climate action in action, and I think it is fantastic.
Great. So I'll just add one comment. It's actually just something that you touched on at the beginning, Marley, and then Dr. Don picked up on at Core Cities last week, with just the 11 biggest cities in the UK and all the rest of it, and then on the LGA call we had yesterday. This culture around local authorities having to bid competitively in a zero-sum game for vital monies is one that we are constantly raising with government. Is not fit for purpose in the modern world. We had it a couple of years ago where we bid for money for child hunger, and we got nothing. We had zero money for child hunger. Other cities got it, but lots of other cities missed out too. And bless, we've got to give the hand up to our business community. We put £25 in the pot. They put 100,000 in the pot, and nearly 60,000 meals went out to children. A couple of summers ago, off the basis of that. But this bidding culture for vital infrastructure, decarbonising infrastructure, is not a way to go, and it's the case we're constantly making, and that feeds into the importance of the work we're doing around finance, as I talked about at the beginning of this as well. How do we as cities and local authorities begin to mobilise to be able to access finance that we need to work with government to get it, but can also be pursued independently of government processes that can tie us up and lead us into these endless bidding rounds that take up, thousands of pounds worth of officer time and not always successful. But let me hand back to you now, Don, to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
Thanks, Marvin. In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you. Agenda item 18 is with you, Tom. It's the Bristol City Council enforcement policy in relation to relevant letting agency legislation.
Thank you. So This paper looks to update our policies to support enforcement of letting agency legislation, updating a policy that was previously brought to Cabinet in 2019. These updates will allow us to continue to take enforcement action under the Tenant Fees Act 2019 and associated lettings legislation. Local authorities must adopt an enforcement policy detailing how we will deal with decisions under the policy, including financial penalties, and how we'll make decisions to prosecute. I'm pleased to say that our policy is also widely used as the foundation for enforcement policies adopted by other local authorities as well. We have a huge private rented sector in Bristol, and it's grown enormously. We estimate there are over 60,000 rented properties, which make up about 30% of the properties in the city, against the backdrop of a national average that is 19%. We have limited opportunities to address the power imbalance between tenant and landlords and ensure that tenants are not exploited by those unscrupulous landlords that are not willing to follow the rules and focusing on profit and on not providing a good quality, well-maintained and safe home. It is vital that we have policies which reflect the powers and responsibilities we do have as the enforcing authority and that we use them. In accordance with our enforcement policy, just by way of background, most landlords and agents are given the opportunity to repay the banned fees that they've incorrectly charged, and were then audited to ensure compliance with the trading standards legislation. Out of a total of 24 breaches, only 3 were dealt with by way of enforcement against the same persistent landlord, I would add. In total, we were able to recover for tenants £24,153 in Bristol in the last financial year alone. Alongside this policy, there's also an attachment for information around electrical safety regulations, which we have previously adopted enforcement for as well. And, you know, really what we're trying to do is make sure we're pulling all those levers and using the few tools that we do have to make sure all homes in Bristol are safe and that landlords are responsible. Lastly, I'd just say as well that if you are a tenant in Bristol and concerned that you may be being charged illegal fees, don't sit in silence. Do reach out, do access support. There's local advice agencies. Obviously, there's Shelter, Acorn, have a Facebook group as well that you can access. So do make sure you access that support. Thank you.
Okay, we've had no public forum on this. I know I will share I'm disappointed about that. You know, housing is an issue of critical importance that we've been talking about today. We talked about it in full council last week. We've also been lobbied heavily over the last 5 years on what happens in private rental sector in the UK. Here it is. There's a chance to talk to the cabinet lead for it, and you know, just acknowledge it happening and give it profile, and that's not happening. So you know, I'm a bit disappointed about that, but nevertheless, it's happening. It's having an impact, and it's supporting people in the private rental sector, which is, I guess is ultimately the important thing. Can I ask any cabinet members if they wanted to comment on this?
Well, only to say, obviously, this is a great thing. It's been well received in recent years, and as we sort of improve and refine it over the years, it will only get better. And as you said, Tom, just make sure people are aware and not suffer in silence.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so let me hand back to you now, Tom, to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
In terms of the decision to be taken today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Okay, I'm going to bring this last item now again, which doesn't have any public forum, but agenda item 21, domestic abuse contract extension. And Cabinet are asked to note the officer executive decision to extend our domestic abuse and sexual violence services contract by 6 months until 30th September 2022. We have seen how crucial these services have been during COVID, and especially as restrictions have eased. It is worth noting that it was, along with child hunger, a suspected and a proven increase in levels of domestic violence and abuse was one of the key risks that we face as a city going into lockdown, with the consequences of that will be one of those silent consequences that echo on as we go through our recovery. So our commission services have reported a more than 30% increase in referrals and have had to adapt services to enable them to offer support remotely. Extending these contracts allows us not only to maintain the continuity of vital services, but it also allows us to take stock of the changing policy landscape surrounding domestic abuse, sexual violence and violence against women and girls. The Domestic Abuse Act, which became law in April, puts new statutory duties on local authorities. So, for example, to assess the need for accommodation-based support, across the area. We've also published our own report through the Mayoral Commission on Domestic Abuse, and I want to thank Jonathan in my office for all the work he did on that, but also it was co-chaired by Councillor Asher Craig and Councillor Helen Godwin, and I want to thank them both as well. And together that report put forward 35 recommendations that now underpin our response as a city to domestic abuse and sexual violence, bringing the partners from around 20 organisations together to work in a much more joined up and coherent way. This extension will also allow us to engage the newly formed Survivors Forum to make sure we capture the voices of those with lived experience as we shape our services. So I, again, express my thanks to Cabinet Member Asher Craig for the work. Again, she's not with us today. Can I ask any Cabinet members if they'd wish to respond? Okay. So it's down to me now to say on the 28th of July, officers took the officer executive decision to grant the extension of the contract, and we note that decision. So that is the final paper in a reordered Cabinet session today. I will say my sadness in that with Nicola's departure, and even when Nicola was here, this is the most gender unbalanced Cabinet we have ever sat in. But that's not reflective of the actual membership of the Cabinet. But it's the end of today's meeting. I want to thank you all, everyone, for attending. The date of the next Cabinet meeting is Tuesday, the 5th of October 2021 at 4 p.m. City Hall. I'll see you there.